Good morning, Wind Chasers. Welcome to another episode of Chasing the Wind. I am Pastor Mark of Pastor Mark fame, I guess, if there is Pastor Mark fame. I was just sitting here reflecting with my friend Andrew and talking about our great high school sports moments, which were, they actually could probably make it to America's Funniest Home Videos. But anyway, or just those fluke moments where it shouldn't have happened, but it did. But anyway, so I'm perusing through Scripture the other day, and I ran across, sometimes there are little phrases, little words that just jump out at me. I think I've shared that with you before. And so here are a couple words that have just jumped out at me today, or this week, recently, whatever you want to call it. Romans chapter 15, verses 20 and 21. So here's what Paul says, and I'll give you the words here in a minute. It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation. Rather, it is written, those who are not told about him will see, and those who have not heard will understand. So I got a question for you, and this has been a question that I am sitting with, because these last couple of years have of craziness, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it a pandemic. Okay, have put the kibosh on a lot of things, and people are tired. They're trying to recuperate, trying to come back, but it's like once one crisis is let up, another crisis seems to come along. And if we are not careful, we can just kind of give up. I worked in kind of life recovery. I don't call it just recovery because we dealt with people who had maybe some addiction recovery stuff, but some of it was just life recovery. And sometimes we need to be in life recovery because life can get rough. But anyway, I would have rather worked with somebody who was angry than somebody who was resigned. If they were resigned, if they were dealing with resignation or not dealing with resignation, it almost was like I had to do the work for them to help pull them out, which is very exhausting. Some of us have probably been in, some of you and I have been in friendships where you're bringing your energy to it, but you're also having to bring energy for it, for the other person. And I've had to just say, look, either you got to bring something to this friendship or it's going to look a lot different because I don't have enough energy for both of us here. And that's been, well, Pastor Mark, that's not very nice. No, it's called speaking the truth in love, and that is nice. That's loving. It's saying, I care about this relationship enough that I want to be in it, but I need you to be in it too. Okay? I mean, you just need to do that. And it was kind of interesting. This person said, okay, I'm in. I'm going to bring something into it. Turns out it was kind of part of the way they had lived all their relationships. So it was an eye-opener for them. It was a gift to them in some ways. But I look at what Paul says here, and he says, it has always been my ambition. We are not called to the same things. I remember when my wife and I were dating at Olivet Nazarene University, and she asked me one day, what do you think God is calling you into? And I said, evangelism. In those days, some 30 years ago, I was a child prodigy. I went when I was 2. Okay, I got it. All right, Lord, forgive me. That was not true. Assembly of God pastor told me one time, if you correct your lie, it doesn't count against you. So I corrected it. Okay, so I think I was 22 or 23. So I misspoke myself. Anyway, I told her, I said, I feel called to be an evangelist. And of course, the evangelist in those days, twice a year, spring and fall, you would go around to churches, you'd preach, at the same church and whatnot. But I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. But that's not the direction I went. But here, a couple of years ago, the Lord showed me, a year and a half ago, the Lord showed me I still have that call of evangelism on my heart. because I'm always trying to direct people and point people to Jesus. You need to get to Jesus, get to Jesus. So I love what Paul says. He goes, it has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known. There are people whose ministry is in the church, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing it. There are people whose ministry is not in the church, but it is from the church into the world. And it might be a specific area. I got a good friend who does a ministry where he goes into schools and he talks to sports teams about character and this sort of thing. And they use the Bible as their source for these character talks, but they don't tell them it's the Bible. And then when kids say, hey, where'd you get that? Then they can talk to them. And, sometimes some schools are like, hey, just talk to them. I don't care where you get it. It's a piece of literature to some people. So just approach it that way. But anyway, been pondering these days as we've kind of had a lot of our ambitions altered, frustrated by the powers that be. And yet it didn't. It caused us to be more creative in the way that we shared the gospel and the way that we did ministry. And we could unpack that to great lengths, but I'm not going to right now. But it has gotten me as I've been reading a book, and there's been just some things that God's almost asked me, Mark, what is your ambition? I got a friend who always says that God gives us the desires of our hearts, and then he gives us the desires of our hearts. That coming out of the Psalm says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your hearts. Your heart, because I only have one heart, and some people question that. But anyway, what is the thing that really drives us? I'm sitting with this right now. And Lord, has it changed to some degree? Is the way that it happens changed? I certainly never thought that I would be sitting here doing this, making these videos, having them put out for all of you to critique and say, that guy's nuts, whatever the deal is. And I'm humbled by many of you sharing them and commenting and this sort of thing. It's different. It's not the way I was trained. I was trained to stand in the pulpit and preach. And so to do this has been interesting and fun, and I enjoy it very, very much. It's a different way of sharing the gospel. Good places that I never thought it would go, nor that I would get to go. And so Paul says, it has always been my ambition to preach the gospel. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he was talking about people who backslide, okay? I'm Wesleyan. They say those Nazarenes believe in backsliding, and they practice it too. I have had struggles. I have had moments when I'm like, God, I don't understand what's going on. I have had moments when I have gone through a dark night of the soul, but I have not jumped off out of God's hand. He does not have a chain around me. I'm not some circus elephant that has a chain around my leg that, so I don't run off. As freely as I chose Christ, freely as I can reject him and walk away from him. He doesn't stop loving me, but I can walk away from him, the prodigal sons. But Lord, I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. I'm really frustrated, whatever the case is. We are not, as Christians, exempt from trouble. And Jesus said, in this world you're going to have trouble, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And that is our hope, is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So Paul says, it has always been my ambition. What is your ambition is my question. What is the thing that God has so laid on your heart that you're like, this is where I got to go? Is it missions? I love people who have a passion to go do mission. There's different things. My buddy who does these character talks, he is so amped up over that. It's so fun. He's stoked about this thing. I've been reading some stuff on justice lately, and justice does not have to be identified in a negative way. Justice is seeing a need and filling it. And it may not have to do with race or or other things that we typically think of justice. It could be taking care of widows and orphans. It could be taking care of the fatherless, those people who maybe they have a dad. I mean, you got to have a dad. Oh boy, that's going to get me in trouble probably. But anyway, that's just biology as I remember it. But dad maybe wasn't in the picture. Or maybe dad was in the picture, but he was checked out. Didn't invest in his kids, whatever the case is. Something been brought to my attention lately is young people are not being taught normal hygiene. Who's teaching young men how to shave? And someone asked me that. They said, talk to me about that the other day. And I'm like, well, I never thought about it. I remember standing watching my dad shave. And him telling me to do this, And then, but I remember some years ago, a young guy came to our church and he shook my hand. He gave me the wet fish. Do not give me a wet fish when I shake your hand. First time I put up with it. The next time he shook my hand, I didn't let go. And I kind of leaned in. He leaned back at me and I said kind of low just to him, I said, a little firmer. And he came down a little harder on my hand. I said, good, don't forget this. No one ever taught him how to shake a hand. So there's this part for me that I want to just help these fatherless, so to speak. Someone will teach them how to shake a hand for Christ. Look me in the eye when you talk to me. That can be a passion. That can be an ambition. What is your ambition? Is it to be in a college setting where you are investing in college students? Is it counseling? We have a counseling association that works out of our church now. That is their ambition. People they are just driven that way. And there's other people that say, it's the sports thing, people. I was bred for comfort, not for speed and agility. It's just understood. I was the last one picked on the team, and I didn't even want to be picked. Okay, I'd have been fine just watching. There's some people that are so into that. That's their thing. I like to hunt. I like to be outdoors. I like to see things grow. That moves me. Those are things that God has put within us. What has God put within you that is your ambition? What has always been your ambition? What is the thing you want to do that you never did, that you felt God? I always felt God wanted me to do such and such. I was just talking to a friend of mine today, lady in her church in her 80s, and they couldn't get a pastor. And so she said, what do I got to do to just at least do someone here to do this? And should this little licensing thing, as he put it, and she's now pastoring, 80 years old. Refire, don't retire. Okay? What is your ambition? I'm gonna close on this note. One of my favorite movies is called The Emperor's Club. There's a great scene in there where the teacher who at this all-boys preparatory school is talking to them about a guy named Shutruk Nahunta who conquered all these lands, but no one remembers him. And he says, great ambition and conquest without contribution is without significance, Mr. Hundert says. And then he looks at each of them, and he looks at them as a group, and he says, what will your contribution be? So maybe a little bit of my ambition is coming out, because I like to encourage people to fulfill what it is that maybe they're supposed to. What, wind chasers, will your contribution be? And gracing us with your presence at church is wonderful, but you know what? There is more that God has for you and I to do. What will your contribution be? What has always been your ambition that you have not yet fulfilled? Maybe it's time to take a look at that and go for it. I'm going to tell you one last thing. This is my last thing, okay? Never planned on going to college. Never planned on getting my master's. Never planned on getting my doctorate. But it all happened because I took a step. And it all happened later than what it was supposed to happen, at least in my book. But it happened when it was supposed to happen. So you know what? If you're still here, you're watching this, You have got some potential, and it's time to say, God, what has been that ambition that's been there? And Paul says, it's always been my ambition to go where the gospel has never been preached. And he went and did it. What will your contribution be? I'm going to stop. That is the very last thing. Keep chasing the wind chasers, because the wind is chasing you. Grace and peace. Till next time, I'm Pastor Mark.